Good evening and welcome to a special edition of Piers Morgan Uncensored. From here, the governor's mansion in Tallahassee, Florida. This is the home of Florida's governor, Ron DeSantis, the man that many think could be the next president of the United States.
Ron DeSantis will soon deliver his State of the State address. He's set to outline his agenda and highlight his possible 2024 presidential campaign.
DeSantis has an even bigger lead, more than 20 points in the survey that we showed you just yesterday.
The news comes as DeSantis' top Republican rival, former President Trump, faces new legal trouble.
I just spent more than an hour with the governor, and we covered a wide range of issues from Ukraine.
I was a bit surprised, I think some people were, that you seem to be almost dismissing it as a kind of
that's not true.
A kind of local dispute.
His time working at Guantanamo Bay.
You authorise the use of force feeding some of the
that's not true.
the detainees who were on hunger strike.
I was a junior officer. I didn't have authority to authorize anything.
And in Iraq.
We could defeat them on the battlefield without even blinking an eye.
To how he proposed to his wife.
We were out on the balcony and just kind of dropped to the knee and
did?
asked her.
Bended knee?
Oh yeah, of course.
So you took the knee, Governor?
Yeah, we did. That's the only time I take a knee is for that one.
What he really thinks of Donald Trump.
You made a fatal error in your relationship with
What's that?
Donald Trump. You got too popular.
And of course, the burning question everybody wants to know the answer to. Is he going to run?
You think you could beat Biden?
I think so.
So you're running then?
Here it is, me, one-on-one with Governor Ron DeSantis in the governor's mansion.
Mr. Governor, well, first of all, thank you very much indeed.
Welcome to the free state of Florida.
I've come all the way from London for this, so, that's because London, like most cities in the world right now, and most countries in the world, they're all beginning to ask the same question. Who's this guy, Ron DeSantis? Are you aware of this?
I am, and we've been able to see a little bit of that. And look, I have the privilege of being the governor of one of the most dynamic jurisdictions in the world right now. If you look over the last 4 or 5 years, the amount of people that have decided to move to Florida, just visit Florida, or even just look to Florida for inspiration has been unlike anything we've seen in the state's history. So we've got a lot of tremendous people here. We've got a lot going on that's positive, and we're not afraid to lead the way.
I want to start with a positive quote, which you're going to really like, and then move on to some negatives that other people have said. So it's going to start well, this, okay? This is from a guy called Richard Littlejohn. He writes for the Daily Mail newspaper in the UK. Also a Florida resident for many decades. And he's a friend of mine. And he wrote this recently. DeSantis is living proof that when conservatives govern as conviction conservatives, committed to freedom, light regulation, low taxes, strong borders, and proper policing, and don't crumble in the face of militant wokery and mad environmentalism being imposed by a noisy minority of headbangers, voters lap it up. And he wrote this obviously after your thumping win in the midterms. What's your response to that first?
Well,
is that a good categorization of why you think you've been successful?
I think all that's true. I think, you just think like environment. We've done more on conservation for our Everglades, but this is like things that really matter to people. I'm not trying to control their lives. I'm just trying to make the environment better. Crime, we're law and order. We are not dealing with letting criminals out or going soft. I actually removed a Soros-backed prosecutor from Tampa who said he wasn't going to follow the law. COVID, we made sure that we protected people's freedoms. People knew they could come here and do well. And yes, we have no income tax. We have one of the lowest per capita tax burdens in the country, lowest per capita debt burdens in the country, and the largest budget surplus in the history of the state. We have more people, significantly more people employed today than we did pre-COVID. A lot of the lockdown states still haven't gotten back to their pre-COVID employment levels. And so I think what we've done has worked, and I think people have responded positively.
All this has made you very popular in Florida. I mean, just anecdotally, being here for a few days, I've been completely stunned, frankly, by the amount of adulation you get from Floridians. Almost everyone I've talked to, well, we love the governor. We love Ron DeSantis. Like, relentless, right? So that's great. But as your star has risen, as you know, out have come the knives.
Sure.
Out have come the wider world wanting to say, okay, well, this is who this guy is. So I want to read you some of the negatives.
Sure.
Okay. This is from Vanity Fair. They said you're a wannabe autocrat, already governed the Sunshine State like a banana republic. You're the Genghis Khan of social issues, using every opportunity to target and demonize groups that have already been targeted and demonized throughout history. Trevor Noah called you an ignorant racist. Stephen Colbert, a gaping bleep. Seth Meyers said you were cruel, sadistic, stupid, repulsive, ghoulish. When you see this kind of hatred, what it says to me as a journalist who's covered a lot of presidential runs and political maneuverings is that it means that people are getting a bit worried about you.
I think it's right. I think they see me over the target. I'm obviously coming at it from a different perspective than they like to see. Those are all people on the left and sometimes far left. But here's the thing. I think the reason why I won the biggest landslide in the history of Florida for governor's race is because that criticism is so far removed from the reality. There's legitimate things we can criticize everybody for, including me. But when you start talking about being an autocrat, all I do is I look at my constitutional powers and I govern in a way to advance the principles that I believe in. I'm passing things through the legislature. That's the constitutional way to do business here. They get mad if we sign legislation, but I'm not just doing it alone. And I would note, they don't have the same criticism of Biden if he does unilateral forgiveness of student loans or some of these other things. So I think a lot of it's misplaced. And I think part of it is like people look and they say, okay, you're saying like all these crazy things. I'm looking at this guy. He makes sense to me. The criticism really falls on deaf ears. And I got it from all quarters for the whole time I was governor. I mean,
right.
You know, during COVID, I was the #1 governor being attacked. And that happened pretty much relentlessly. And yet the people...
I criticized you.
There you go. And
I
that's
discovered
fine.
today, I checked what I tweeted about you historically.
There you go.
And I found a tweet, I think in 2021, where it looked like Florida's record was not going to be good on COVID because you've been one of the first people in America, certainly, to bring back freedoms for people. And I was quite scathing. I said, this guy's going to have blood on his hands. Actually, it didn't turn out that way. Actually, you were very bold in a lot of the stuff you were doing, bolder than many other governors. And it turned out in many areas you were vindicated.
Well, here's the thing. Excess mortality, lowest in the Sun Belt, even lower than New York and California for all-cause excess mortality. And then, of course, economically and freedom, we've done way better. Now, listen, I was very concerned about COVID because I've got more elderly than just about anyone. I've got 4,000 long-term care facilities. I've got condos with seniors stuffed in them all across. So this was, and I'm a tourism state. So this was a huge existential threat to Florida. So we took it very seriously.
And you weren't an anti-vaxxer, to be clear, right?
Well, no, look, I mean, I think that we thought the vax would end COVID. I think during the Delta wave, even though you had massive vax, you saw a major a wave of COVID. And so then what I did is I go, okay, the vax isn't stopping the spread. Let's make sure people have treatments. But we took it very seriously. I followed the data, but I also believe that, okay, there's data that you look at, but you also have to trust people to make decisions. This idea that we're going to keep using coercion, I just don't think that that works and is sustainable. So part of it was the science, but part of it was also just a belief in people making their best decisions for themselves.
One of the other criticisms that's used against you is about your personality. It probably comes from people who don't know you very well, because those who do, who I've spoken to, tell a different story. But you're being depicted in some of the national media as very intense, quite boring, charisma devoid. You know, someone reviewed your book and said he would launch any charm offensive unarmed. Somebody else, New York Times, a politician's memoir written by ChatGPT, right? And there's a kind of consistent vein of this. You know, you're aware of this. A, do you care when people get personal like this about your character? And B, is any of that true? Or is it that you have a kind of a persona that you prefer to have as a leader of a state like Florida, and you save the other stuff from away from the public glade?
Well, I appreciate the knocks on the book. It's the #1 book in America,
right,
far and away. I've sold more than any non-president in the history of the country in terms of the first week. So we've been doing pretty good. A lot of people like it.
Does a hostile New York Times review help sales?
Yes, with conservatives, of course it does, yes. So here's the thing. I think, you know, there is, these are people who are in the political class, journalist class, politicians, and like DC in particular. They get mad. I don't do the cocktail parties. I don't like rubbing elbows with other people. I like doing my job and then spending time with my family. That's just what I do. A lot of the people that are criticizing, you know, they would say, oh, he doesn't do well with donors. He doesn't glad hand with them. And yet I raise more money than any non-presidential candidate in the history of America. Are you kidding me? So we tend to do, we do well. But I do think that, you know, I deal better with regular people than I do with some of the people in the political class. And I think that has been true for the entire time I've been around.
Your book, the best-selling book, as you rightly said, you start with a quote from Sir Winston Churchill, the greatest of all Britons, certainly as far as I'm concerned. And it's about courage. And it says, courage is rightly considered the foremost of virtues, for upon it all others depend. Why did you choose that as the quote to kind of set up the book?
Because I think what I've been called upon to do as governor is make the right decisions when it wasn't easy. And when people tell you politically, I mean, a lot of people thought I was dead a few years ago because I was charting my different course. And my view is, you know, I got elected to save the jobs of the people I represent. It can't be looking out for my own job. I can't worry about getting criticized. I can't worry about the political fallout. I've got to do what's right, and I've got to stick by that, and I've got to be willing to take the arrows. And I think we need more of that in terms of our leaders now, because when you want to do the right thing with the media environment, social media, all this stuff, it's usually not like people are just like, oh, great. Like, people come at you, and that's just the price you got to pay for leadership. But I think it's an ingredient that's essential.
Is Churchill a hero of yours?
Absolutely.
Why?
Well, he saw the danger very, very early on. He spoke out, and he rallied Britain in a very difficult time. And I think he was just very inspirational. He was a strong leader, of course, but he had a way with words. I mean, how you say these things to really stir people's patriotism, emotions, I think is something that I've always admired.
Courage is a big theme of your book. What does courage mean to you, real courage?
Well, I think it means just willing to pay a price. And I tell a story about when I used to fly to D.C., you'd fly by the National Mall, look out the left side of the plane, see all the great monuments and the Capitol, big man, how great is our country? But the best monuments are really outside the right side of the plane, over the Potomac River in a place called Arlington National Cemetery. Headstones arranged orderly over those rolling hills.
I've been there.
And they made the ultimate sacrifice, and it just shows, this is on the grandest level, you can have the best Constitution in the world, the best Declaration of Independence in the world. If you don't have people willing to stand up, risk, and give their lives for that, it doesn't amount to very much. Now here, what we have to deal with is far less than what they had to give, but you do got to give something. And if you're not willing to pay a price to exercise leadership, you ain't going to be a good leader.
You seem to have a very thick skin, and I mean that as a compliment.
Yeah.
But even for someone like you, as I say, your star rises and you start being called the new Hitler, the new Mussolini, the new Genghis Khan. That's all been said about you by people. It's quite extraordinary.
Yeah, but I think it reveals them more than it says anything about me.
Do you care about that kind of thing?
No, honestly, I think if they have to resort to stuff like that, I mean, think about it. Those names, when I'm the state that's the fastest growing and the #1 net in migration, if that was true, people would be fleeing Florida and I wouldn't have won by 1.5 million votes. So I think it's that they have trouble really hitting me on substance. And so they got to resort to some of the knee-jerk stuff. So it kind of just confirmation that I'm over the target. And look, those voices are, they're on the far left and they see me basically beating them on a lot of these issues.
There's a great quote. And I'm actually going to say the word, although we'll bleep it when this airs, but this was from a Republican consultant to the New Yorker. Ron's strength as a politician is that he doesn't give a Ron's weakness as a politician is that he doesn't give a What do you think of that depiction of where you've got to? Well, any truth to that?
I think, like, if you look at the daily news cycle, all the nonsense that gets, the spaghetti that gets thrown against the wall, it doesn't bother me at all. I don't get involved with that. Like, I have a true north I have to get to on all the issues that I'm trying to do. You either do it or you don't, and that will just kind of take you off course. And so in that sense, the political circus, I don't care for that, and I don't why. But I do think in terms of just every day waking up, I mean, I care about making a difference for people. And you've seen it like COVID, education, all these things. People appreciate if you're willing to stand up and fight for them, man, they'll walk over broken glass barefoot to support you, and that's what we've done.
You've achieved a lot in Florida, and you had this thumping win. 1.5 million more people voted for you second time round as governor. An amazing validation of what you've been doing. And like I say, I've been hearing it firsthand, so there's no denying you've been very successful and very popular. But that prompts the question, could you do that nationally? Could you transport the Ron DeSantis playbook, if you like, for Florida and make it work for the whole of America?
I think you could. I think one of the things that was interesting about my election is the voters in Florida overwhelmingly thought the country was on the wrong track, but they thought Florida was on the right track.
Right.
So they saw the difference in terms of how things are governed. I mean, just think about it. We run big budget surpluses. The federal government's $31 trillion in debt. We're very tough on crime. The policies in Washington are to be more weak on crime. You know, we believe in good stewards of the environment, but I don't want to control everyone's behavior with some of the stuff that's going on. And we have really fought against the woke ideology. You know, people, this is not just Republicans.
Which I completely agree. I read a whole book about this.
It's not just Republicans that are concerned. These are across the spectrum. To have stuff that's being done, people know this isn't even in reality. We cannot be governed by a woke agenda. And I would tell you, some of these mayors and prosecutors that have gotten elected and around the country on that agenda, you know, their societies have decayed as a result of it. San Francisco, some of these places where crime is up. So I think just some common sense, some leadership, some courage, and being right on the issues, I think could go a long way.
What I want to know is, where did this come from? So tell me a little bit about your upbringing. I know your father was a Nielsen TV engineer for TV ratings.
Because back then you had to put the box on the television sets.
And he was physically doing that. And your mum was a nurse. And they still live in Dunedin, I think, in
Dunedin, Florida.
Dunedin.
Founded by Scots.
Yes, indeed, yeah. Tell me about them and about the influence they've had on you.
So my father is from Western Pennsylvania, in a town called Aliquippa. That's a steel town. His father worked in the steel mills. My mother's from Youngstown, Ohio, another steel town. So this is blue collar, gritty, religious, patriotic. And so I was born in Florida and grew up in the Tampa Bay area, and that was a great place to do. But in terms of like my household values really reflected that working class upbringing. And basically what I think instilled in me is, you know, I loved the country, trusted God, but just really believed you don't get anything handed to you in this life. You've got to work for it. And so I had a work ethic that I developed in my childhood and that carried me through that, you know, there's a lot of things that happen in this world that you can't control. The one thing you can control, are you going to be able to look in the mirror every day and say, I'm getting the most out of my God-given ability? And that's what I try to do.
The other question I do is look in the mirror every day and think, am I about to do something my mother will either like or dislike?
There you go.
Do you have that same
Absolutely.
guiding principle?
Absolutely.
So your mother, very important in terms of keeping you on the straight.
Yeah, I mean, look, just in terms of like growing up, I knew what was right and wrong. That was instilled into me, and that's just something that carries with you all the way for the rest of your life.
You did a press conference this morning, and you were responding to the reports, rumors of Donald Trump potentially being indicted. And you gave an interesting response, very sort of supportive of him in a way, by saying, yeah, you know, I think what's happening there is outrageous. It's political posturing by the SDA and so on in New York, and they should be focused on more important things. But you also repeated twice you didn't have any knowledge of hush money being paid to porn stars. Was I right to feel that there was a slightly censorious tone to that kind of thing is just not anything you would ever get involved with?
Well, I think there's a lot of speculation about what the underlying conduct is. That is purported to be it. And, you know, the reality is that's just outside my wheelhouse. I mean, that's just not something that I can speak to. So, you know, I hope it doesn't come to where you end up seeing this going forward. I mean, look, if you are a very strident prosecutor, and this guy's on the left, and you're not prosecuting a lot of crimes, Manhattan's gotten less safe, you're going to go after somebody on the other side for some novel offense. That just does not inspire confidence, and people see that as weaponizing the justice system. So I think it's fundamentally wrong to do that, and you know, I just made it be known. But we'll see. Maybe it won't come to that. I mean, we haven't seen anything firm yet.
Does personal conduct in any leader politically in America, does it matter how you behave as a leader?
I mean, I think at the end of the day, what a leader, you really want to look to people like our founding fathers, like what type of character, it's not saying that you don't ever make a mistake in your personal life, but I think what type of character are you bringing? So somebody who really set the standard is George Washington, because he always put the republic over his own personal interests. When we won the American Revolution, Washington surrendered his sword. George III said, well, if he surrenders...
Can you not intrude into private grief? Without him, we could have had King Piers.
That's right.
By now.
But George III said, he's the greatest man in the world if he gives up power. And so I think the personal is more about how you handle your public duties and the kind of character that you bring to that endeavor.
How important is truth to you? We live in a world where people talk about my truth, as if somehow you can create your own version of the truth. To me, facts are facts. The truth is what it is. It's the truth. People feel, whether it's been in the US or the UK with Boris Johnson, they feel that there's been a departure from truth being an important factor of leadership.
100%. I mean, look, truth is essential. We have to agree that there's a certain reality to the world we live in. And if we can just create our own facts, then we're never going to be able to agree on anything or never really be able to do policy in a way that makes sense. And so, yes, it's not your truth or my truth, it's the truth.
You were captain of your little baseball team, I think, the Little League World Series you went to, which was a big deal at the time, right?
That's right.
And you didn't win it, and you came up against some Californian pitcher who was pitching at an obscene rate of knots. What did that whole experience, though, bring you as a young Ron DeSantis?
Well, at that time, Taiwan was the powerhouse. They would win it most of the time. So we did the first day of practice for All-Stars. We wrote WWT on the bills of our hat. We want Taiwan. So you're talking about only 4 American teams even make it to Williamsport. And so we set out to do it, and we got there. And we didn't win the whole World Series, but that told me, these little town in Florida can put their mind to this and do it. You can accomplish really great things. And that was really the first thing that I had ever done in my life that was outside of my little provincial upbringing. And so I think it really helped me just be willing to shoot for the stars.
You went to Yale and Harvard. It was described as a blue-collar kid from Tampa among the communist millionaires. You said you were the only person to leave either of those places more conservative than you started.
I think so. I mean, I wasn't political when I got there, because where I came from, I didn't know if you were Republican, Democrat, but definitely God, country, those basic things. When I got there, you had a lot of militant leftism. One of Yale's mottos is for God, for country, for Yale, but you get in the classroom, no way. I mean, it was very anti-religion, particularly Christianity, and very anti-Americanism, and really adopting a lot of the left-wing mantras of the day. And I kind of rebelled against that because I'm like, wait a minute, I'm proud to be an American. I wouldn't be here if in any other country, perhaps. And so this is something that I rejected. And then by the time I got to Harvard, I was already set. They weren't going to change me.
What's extraordinary is to watch the way campus sort of ideology has gone. I mean, if it was bad then, it's immeasurably worse now. This woke ideology has got a grip, not just in America, but in the UK and around the world. What do we do about this? I mean, when students are basically conditioned to think that there's only one way of thinking, that to me is you're heading toward a kind of totalitarianism. It's actually dangerous for society that they're not challenged with other views.
And it's not good for them because when they get into the real world, their assumptions have never been questioned. You should want your assumptions questioned. A university is about pursuing truth. It's about rigor and academic integrity and giving people the foundation so they can think for themselves and be citizens of the republic, not to impose ideology. In Florida, we're actually doing something about it. I just appointed a bunch of conservative trustees to New College in Sarasota. They've recategorized the mission to being a classical liberal arts university, and we're working with all of our state universities to ensure that they're not imposing ideology through the bureaucracy. We want there to be free speech on campus. We want the professors to come from a wide variety of viewpoints. You can't have every professor having the same leftist dogma in the class. That's not good education, and it doesn't serve the best interests of the state of Florida.
There was one professor in America, I can't remember where he was, but it was quite extraordinary. He for 25 years, he'd done a lecture all the time about the use of offensive language. And as part of the lecture, he would use offensive language to illustrate what he was talking about. And then a bunch of very woke, hyped up students complained that he was using offensive language, and he got fired for using offensive language in a lecture about the dangers of using offensive language. And at that point, I realized the world had literally gone nuts.
Well, so when we did the New College thing, there were professors from all across the country contacting some of our new trustees saying, how do I get down there? And these are not all right-wingers. A lot of them are Democrats, but they see this really hostile environment. It's a very intellectually impressive environment. And it's like you're walking on eggshells, that you could lose your job by making like some verbal faux pas. That is not the road that we want to go down. And it's almost like some of the wokesters, you will pay a bigger price by offending wokeism than if you commit like serious crimes.
Right.
Other than that, How is that something that makes any sense?
Right. I mean, I lost a job because I disbelieved Meghan Markle.
There you go.
With her claims of racism against the royal family. I said, I don't believe it. So I had to leave my job. I mean, it was completely insane when you think about it. Yeah. Now I'd be fired for believing it.
That's true.
Right?
That's true.
I mean, it's true.
Although I'll tell you though, my book beat Prince. His book had come out earlier, #1, and then when I became number 1,
knocked him off. I know.
I was higher than Prince Harry.
We're all very grateful. What do you make of those two? Do you have a view of them?
I don't. I mean, I think that I really respected the Queen. I mean, I think she was really elegant, and I think her stoicism, and I think it was really good. As the younger generations, it's a little bit more mixed. I mean, that's just the reality.
Are they annoying?
I think for some they are. I mean, look, I'm not involved in that, Baloo. I just kind of focus on, but I think for some Americans they can be.
You had a choice when you left Harvard, which was to take big money and go into relatively easier work, I guess, than what you chose to do. But instead you wanted to serve in the Navy. That's a big moment for you, that decision. Why did you decide to do that?
Well, a lot of that was, in the wake of 9/11. The world had changed. I was growing up in like the 90s in high school and then in college, graduated before 9/11. Our country didn't have a care in the world. The Cold War was over, there was prosperity, and people weren't even thinking of that. And then when the towers fell, it changed my outlook. And I know we didn't have a draft or any of that, but I was like, look, I should be willing to help out here, and I'll have time to do other things in my life. And so we ended up volunteering. We did the Navy, and at that time I didn't know what I was in store for, but I ended up doing a lot of stuff around the country and around the world, including being in Iraq. And it was really, really valuable experience. I mean, when you wear the cloth of your country, that's meaningful service. And the people that you meet along the way are great, but there's just a lot, Jack Kennedy said people can look back on their life with a great deal of satisfaction and say, I served in the U.S. Navy, and I agree with them.
Where were you on 9/11?
I was, I think I had just graduated college and was kind of not a care in the world, and all of a sudden, boom, it happened. And so I had already been either accepted or planning on going to law school. And that's when I decided to start looking into some other career choices.
That moment was a pivotal moment in modern American history in many ways, unleashed a whole series of consequences. Would you have done things any differently if you'd been running America at the time? Obviously, we're 20 years on from the Iraq War, for example, which many viewed as an illegal conflict potentially, but certainly one that created a lot of turmoil, the rise of ISIS and so on. Would you have invaded Iraq?
So I think in hindsight, it's very easy to make these things. So clearly we had to go to Afghanistan, knock off the Taliban, and decimate al-Qaeda. I would not have stayed in Afghanistan for what we did. I mean, the idea that we were going to turn that into a democracy, it's just a different culture, and they're organized differently. And then I think in Iraq, what I saw there was, you said democracy when Saddam was removed. These are people cozying up with the Iranians. And so we now have a situation where Iraq is basically an Iranian satellite, and Iran has probably been our most significant adversary, certainly in that region, since the Shah fell. So in hindsight, I mean, I honor everybody's service because I think they did a lot of great things. But in hindsight, has the Middle East gotten better as a result of that? I think Iran's gotten stronger as a result of that conflict.
You spent some time at Guantanamo Bay, obviously a very contentious entity in many ways. Barack Obama campaigned in 2008-09 to close it and didn't. It's still open today. Clearly a lot of very bad people went there, but we now know there were some who were detained for over a decade and were innocent people. You were there in a legal capacity. Did you have any qualms about what was going on there, about holding people that long without trial?
Well, I think that there should have been military commissions. I did support that. But what I saw, because there was a media narrative about they were being mistreated in Gitmo, what I saw was basically a professionally run prison. And there was different kind of categories. So the Khalid Sheikh Mohammed's going to be in like a maximum security. Some of these other guys were like open air, play soccer all day, who were viewed as less of a threat. But what they're trying to figure out is, okay, if we release this person back to Afghanistan, are they going to engage in terrorism against? And that's hard to know definitively. So I think they tended to err on the side of caution. Now, I will say these detainees would all say, they all said they're Koran salesmen. Like every one of them was a Koran salesman. And that clearly wasn't the case either.
But did you have any issues as a lawyer with people being held that long without any trial?
But it's a tough thing when you have situation with terrorism and war because they're not a nation state, and how you can't try them, I think, in a civilian court, so you really need military commissions. I actually thought I was going to be involved in military commissions, and they really just sputtered. They didn't get off the ground. They should have had those up and running, and it's some due process, but it isn't what you would get in a civilian trial.
The Washington Post did a big deep dive on this today, actually, about what you did out there. One of the things they said was that you authorized the use of force feeding.
That's
some of
true.
the
Yeah, that's not true. Yeah, any of the stuff that people
just to finish, force
okay.
feeding the detainees who were on hunger strike. Was that true?
So I was a junior officer. I didn't have authority to authorize anything. There may have been a commander that would have done feeding if someone was going to die, but that was not something that I would have even had authority to do.
So that's wrong.
Yeah, absolutely.
What did you learn? You then went to Fallujah in 2007. That was the year of the surge.
Yep.
I think more American troops died that year than in any year since World War II, I think. So really incredibly dangerous and a lot going on. You were there as a legal counsel to the commander of Navy SEAL Team 1.
Yep.
And obviously the SEALs weren't as well known as they are, I guess, now. But an incredibly demanding job, I would think, under a lot of pressure. What did you learn about yourself while you were doing that?
Well, it's interesting. So, we had folks all across Al Anbar province. So, like, the headquarters was Fallujah. We had Ramadi, Al Assad, Haditha, Hit, all these places. And there were operations every night. And, they tend to work at night. And so you're just crazy out one day after another for a 6.5 month period. But, at the end of the day, I mean, honestly, I kind of felt honored to be there because these were some of our best people that I was able to kind of hitch a wagon with. And they were making a good difference. By the time we left, there were not Americans dying in Al Anbar province anymore. I mean, Al-Qaeda in Iraq had been crushed. The Anbar awakening had happened, and most of the deaths at that point, probably 90%, were in the Shia areas with the Iranian-backed forces. So it was a successful deployment, not just our deployment, but the Marines and the Army who were there during that time.
Did you come under any personal attack?
Not anything special. I mean, I would travel from different areas, but what they would do is, like if you fly in a helicopter, they would do pitch black at night so that they couldn't, shoot it down with an RPG, but they would not go in the daytime for transport because they were concerned about that. And then the other risk was just being in convoys. And, they had done the IEDs at the time, and I never had any of that happen to me, thankfully.
Still quite an unnerving experience.
Well, you just don't know. I mean, because the thing is, we could defeat them on the battlefield without even blinking an eye, but that wasn't how they were fighting. They were fighting to try to say, if you're going convoying from Ramadi to Fallujah, we're going to try to blow up your convoy. And so it's just kind of like, okay, if the number's called, the number's called.
I want to talk to you about another war, Ukraine. I was quite surprised, I'll be honest with you, by what you said last week about Ukraine, describing it as a territorial dispute. It's picked up a lot of blowback, as you know. Only surprised because of your military background and because you were on record as helping Ukraine after the invasion of Crimea. Do you regret actually just using that one phrase?
Well, I think that it's
a
been
territorial dispute.
I think it's been mischaracterized. Obviously, Russia invaded that. That was wrong. They invaded Crimea and took that in 2014. That was wrong. What I'm referring to is kind of where the fighting is going on now, which is that western border or eastern border region, Donbass, and then Crimea. And you have a situation where Russia has had that, I don't think legitimately, but there's a lot of ethnic Russians there. So that's some difficult fighting. And so whatever, the conflict area, that's what I was referring to. And so it wasn't that I thought Russia had a right to that. And so if I should have made that more clear, I could have done it. But I think the larger point is, okay, Russia has not shown the ability to take over Ukraine, to topple the government, or certainly to threaten NATO. That's a good thing. They've been weakened. You now have the fighting in those areas. I just don't think that's a sufficient interest for us to escalate more involvement. I would not want to see, American troops involved there. But the idea that I think somehow Russia was justified that's nonsense.
I mean, I was in Ukraine interviewing President Zelensky last summer. What I was struck by was the utter resolve of the people there, which I suspect would be exactly the same if somebody invaded any part of America, which was not to give Putin an inch. Not an inch. In fact, they wanted Crimea back. And I think they would take issue with it being categorized as
so like I say, I think they have the right to that territory. I just think that's the source of the conflict. It's in those regions, which there's likely going to continue to be a lot of conflict on that going forward. So if I could snap my fingers, I'd give it back to Ukraine 100%. But the reality is, what is America's involvement in terms of escalating with more weapons? And certainly ground troops, I think, would be a mistake. So that was the point I was trying to make. But Russia was wrong to invade. They were wrong to take Crimea.
What's your view of Putin?
Look, I think he's got grand ambitions. I think he's hostile to the United States. But I think the thing that we've seen is he doesn't have the conventional capability to realize his ambitions. And so he's basically a gas station with a bunch of nuclear weapons. And so for us, one of the things we could be doing better is utilizing our own energy resources in the United States. We could be permitting natural gas pipelines from Marcellus, doing a lot in Alaska. That's where he gets all his power, and obviously he's influenced Europe by having so much energy. So the way to hit Putin is to hit him with energy. But I do think you look back, all the defense analysts and me in the past, we overestimated his conventional capability. This has been a huge blunder for him, huge costs. And we'll see what ends up happening with his longevity and power. But this has been a loss for them.
There is a move now to hold him accountable for war crimes, bombing maternity hospitals, and genocidal activity in parts of Ukraine, wiping out whole cities, Mariupol and others. Would you support that?
I mean, I think he is a war criminal. This ICC, we have not done that in the United States because we're concerned about our soldiers or people being brought under it. So I don't know about that rubric, but I do think that he should be held accountable.
How does it end the Ukraine war, do you think?
That's the thing. I mean, I think I think those regions and the border in Crimea, I think are likely to be a stalemate for quite some time. And unfortunately, a lot of people will end up dying if that's the case. But I do not think it's going to end with Putin being victorious. I do not think the Ukrainian government is going to be toppled by him, and I think that's a good thing.
One of the issues about it was, people were saying, okay, well, what happens if China decides to invade Taiwan, which may well happen in the next couple of years? If they do, is that also a territorial dispute?
Yeah, the thing with territory is just that's where the fighting was. There's not as fighting on the western side, and you have situations where there's ethnic Russians there, and it's a messy situation. But Russia did not have a right to go into Crimea or to go in February of 2022, and that should be clear.
And if China did invade Taiwan?
That would be aggression. Absolutely, it would be aggression.
And Americans should get involved in that?
So I would say that Taiwan is a strong ally of the United States. I think that's a critical interest. I think it's for us, but also for our key allies like Japan and South Korea. And I think overall, the number one issue that we face internationally is checking the growth and the rise of China. They're much more powerful, I think, than Putin and Russia are, and they really represent the biggest threat that we've seen to our ability to lead since the Soviet Union.
Would you ban TikTok?
I would. I think so.
Would you?
I think so. I mean, I think
from everybody in America.
I think it's a security risk. I think they are harvesting so much data on our citizens. There's a whole bunch of other apps and stuff that are out there. And honestly, Piers, I got young kids. I don't want our kids on some of this stuff. It's not healthy for them.
You haven't seen the cute dog TikToks?
I've seen that, but what the CCP does, the TikTok in China is sanitized. It's more wholesome. Here, they're putting in a lot of bad stuff too. So I think it's had a corrosive impact, but that in and of itself wouldn't be enough. What's enough, though, is how they're harvesting that to use against the American people.
You're a father of 3 young kids. I've got 4 kids, but they're all a bit older. One's 11 now, the other's in their 20s. But social media, it seems to me, to have been a real double-edged sword. A lot of great comes out of it, the ability to communicate and everything else. But a lot of bad stuff, too, is coming with it. What do we do about social media, do you think?
Well, it's really tough. And when some of this, I think back when I was in Iraq, I had to use a satellite phone to call Casey. I had no FaceTime. I had no ability to do any of that. It just didn't exist then. So now you have the ability to connect with people. I mean, there is some huge benefits, but these kids, I think that they get mired into this. I think there's a lot of bad stuff that go over there. And what we try to do with our kids, they're 6, 4, and 2, and we say, like, you need to be outside, playing around, reading books, and doing all that. So I think in terms of the youth, I think the social media has had a net negative on that. One of the things I propose, which some of these people criticize me for in schools, is, a teacher should have the right that students should put their phones in the front of the class, sit there and learn, then they can grab the phone.
But I agree with this.
Yeah, I mean, like, why do you want them on the phone?
I agree with most of the things you're doing in schools.
Okay, yeah.
But I think it's because I've had 4 kids who've gone through school.
Yeah.
And you're like, why wouldn't you actually take their phones away?
Yeah.
They don't need phones
and
in
it's
class.
just, you put them in a cubby or something. It's not like the school is going to, like, search their phone. You put it in the cubby, sit down, do your lesson, then take it. If you want to use it at recess or all that. But I definitely think more people that live their lives on those apps and those phones, that's not good for society.
And on sex education in school, what is your clear position on that now?
So what our position is basically, we don't want to be injecting sexuality and things like gender ideology in particularly the younger grades. And you do have places around this country where they will have kindergartners say, okay, declare what your gender is, or tell a student that they may have been born a boy, but maybe they're really a girl. That is totally inappropriate. I think these are things that parents should be taking the lead on as they deem appropriate, but that should not be imposed in the school system.
Did you ever think you'd be alive in a world where a 6'4" former male swimmer could suddenly identify as female and start demolishing women born to female bodies in competitive swimming, for example?
Yeah.
You know who I'm talking about.
Penn.
It just seems
After spending 3 years on the men's team.
unsuccessful.
And then switching there. And then you have the situation, you have that famous picture of the swimmer with then the three women, and they're so much smaller. The runner-up on that was actually from Sarasota, and I did a proclamation from the state saying she was the rightful winner. She was the best women's 500-yard freestyle swimmer. So it's taking away opportunities from girls and women athletes. In Florida, we basically said, look, we're going to go based on biology, and we're just going to do that, and people can either like that or not, but we're not going to take away opportunities from these young girls.
I completely agree. I think it's a mad debate. Talking of young girls, actually a young woman that you met on a golf range many years ago. So there you are, you're on a golf range, and you spy two things. One is there's a bucket of balls that you have, and there's this very beautiful woman who you didn't know, but she was called Casey. Turned out to be your wife.
Yeah.
You didn't know that. Now, she tells this story and says that actually she was looking over and eyeing with great covetousness your bucket of balls. Your version is that she was looking at you and eyeing you up. Have you reached an agreement about this?
So I thought she was looking at me. I really did. And, we did have the balls. And so I used the balls as a way to start talking to her. But, my view was like, look, what's the worst she can do? Not want to talk to me? I'm like, I am not letting this opportunity go. So we went over there, we started talking, we divvied up the balls, hit them. And then we went out after that, and kind of the rest is history. But I think, in fact, she was looking at the balls. I do think I was wrong. But you know what?
So you have a bunch of golf balls to thank for true love.
You do. And who would have thought that we both would have been there at the same time randomly on some random day in 2006. I'm just fresh into the Navy, and she was a local TV reporter at the time, and we just happened to hit it off.
When did you know this is the one for me?
I mean, I would say pretty early, I was like, this is different. And, I made sure to court her. Of course, I got mobilized to go to California, then Iraq, so we stayed together through all that. But I told myself, as soon as I get back from Iraq, I'm popping the question. And so we ended up doing that. And
how did you do that?
Oh, I took her to a nice little resort in Florida, and we kind of went out, and we were out on the balcony and just kind of dropped to the knee. And
you did? Bended knee?
Oh, yeah, of course.
So you took the knee, Governor?
Yeah, we did. That's the only time I take a knee is for that one. So, and she...
and you had a ring?
Had a nice ring, and everything was really good. And
did she hesitate?
No.
Immediate, yes.
Immediate, yeah. Well, I think she had let it be known that she was happy and that we were ready to go to the next level as well. So I don't think it was anything that was like a super shock, but it was good to get that one in the win column.
How many times would you say before that you'd been properly in love?
Oh, I don't think anything like this. I think that this was definitely unique for me.
And it's been great ever since?
I don't think I could have done any better in life. I mean, I really don't. Not just to have a friend. She gets more beautiful as she gets older, and we have 3 wonderful kids. She's a great mother. She's a great first lady. I mean, she's really the whole package. And, there's a picture that I have, 2019 inauguration, 2023, sitting at the desk, same pose. She's prettier in 23 than she was in 2019. And she had a kid. She went through 4 years of this nonsense, and she beat breast cancer.
Yeah.
And how do you end up being prettier after 4 years of that? She finds a way to do it.
When she got cancer, she talked very movingly about this in a campaign commercial for when you ran for governor in 2022. But she talked very emotionally about it and gave a real, heartfelt assessment of you. And I don't want to, bring your blushes here, but she said, When I was diagnosed with cancer and I was facing the battle for my life, he was the dad who took care of my children when I couldn't. He was there to pick me off the ground when I literally couldn't stand. He was there to fight for me when I didn't have the strength to fight for myself. When you watch that, because I don't think you'd seen it before it went out,
No.
right? And you see your wife crying as she pays that kind of tribute to you, what did that make you feel?
Well, look, for sickness and in health, good times and bad. I mean, that's the job of a spouse. And to have her thank me publicly like that was very heartwarming. I know it touched a lot of people throughout the state of Florida. And you're right, I didn't know what she was going to say because she asked me, I want to go over this. I said, don't worry about my filter. Don't listen to anyone else. You just speak from your heart. So she kicked everybody out of the room when she filmed it, except the camera guy. And she just spoke from the heart. No script, no anything. And I think it told a lot of people about kind of what we've gone through as a family. You never want to see anyone go through something like that. But there is something a little bit more poignant when you have a young mother that's fighting for her life with these young kids, because no kid should lose a parent like that. And so that, I think, was a source of fight for her. It was a source of fight for me. And we just had such a great outpouring of support from the community that it did lift her spirits.
Did you fear that you may lose her?
So it's interesting. You always have that fear, but I'm a data guy. I went and looked it up. I said, you're going to beat it. She's like, and she didn't necessarily want to hear that because she was so scared, just as anyone would be. But I'm like, I've looked at the data. I'm looking at the treatments. You're going to be okay. So I really felt confident, and the doctors had a plan. I talked to doctors all around the country, and I didn't even tell them what the plan was. I was like, okay, what do you recommend? And they all said do the things that we ended up doing. So I felt really, really comfortable. There was a big consensus from people all over the country that I talked to. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I absolutely thought she was going to beat it.
What was the lowest moment, do you think?
I think the chemotherapy. I mean, I think too. I think the beginning when we get because she went to the doctor, she felt something. The doctor cleared her. They did a physical exam, said that you didn't have anything, don't worry. And like me, if a doctor said I'm okay, I would never think twice about it. She had a feeling that there was just something wrong. So she really fought to get a mammogram. And so a couple weeks later, we got it. I told her, I was like, you're fine. And then it came back. And so I think that was really, really difficult.
I mean, that's a jolt moment.
It really is, because it totally changes your life. It changes your family's trajectory. Everything all of a sudden is up for grabs. So I think that was, one of the most difficult. And then just not knowing what to expect, especially before we saw a physician and one of the cancer doctors, we had no idea really what we were dealing with, apart from my kind of side research that I'm pulling up stuff from like Mayo Clinic and researching. So then that was tough. And then I would say the chemotherapy, it saps you. I mean, it's just...
And actually each course can get progressively
and
more unpleasant, right?
It's putting like poison in your body, and to see someone that you love go through that, it was really tough on her, but it's also just, you hate to see it. It's like, what can you do? I mean, I can't make it all of a sudden get better. So that's why I was there, just being the helping hand. And so I went to all the chemotherapies with her. And it was interesting. I got attacked by the left for not being in the office one day, because my schedule's put out every day. So there was one day where there was nothing on the schedule. And this was in between like Christmas and New Year's, and like a lot of these other governors are in the Caribbean vacationing, but I'm at Moffitt Cancer Center with her when they were saying that I wasn't doing my job. And I was just like, politics, it's fine to do, but it's like, you should definitely be rooting for the First Lady of our state to do well, and you should be thankful that her husband is there supporting her.
When she was declared cancer-free, did she ring the bell?
She did, yeah.
Were you there?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I mean, that moment for you.
Oh, yeah. Well, here's the thing.
Well, I know you're a tough guy, Ron DeSantis.
I know.
Standing there as your wife rings the cancer-free bell.
We had a big hug.
Did you shed a tear then?
I was emotional, and we celebrated a little bit afterwards, which was good. But I believed that that's what was going to happen, and so for me, it was confirmation. Once we got the scan results and everything, I knew that was the result. She, I think, still wasn't convinced that she was cancer-free until they finally did all the tests and the doctor told her, "You're cancer-free."
How did you celebrate?
Actually, Guinness.
Did you? Really?
We both really like Guinness.
I love Guinness.
It's just something. And when I remember we went to Ireland and Scotland years ago, and like just being in the pubs, being able to do it. It's they said that the beer was all warm over there, but they actually have Guinness extra cold taps.
Oh no!
So you'd get it. I mean, it's just fantastic.
So you had a couple of pints of Guinness.
That's right.
No better way to do it. Huh? There was an incredibly sad time in your life, which was the loss of your sister, Christina, who died in London. It was reported she died of a pulmonary embolism. Is that
Yep.
what happened? And she was leading a great life. She just got engaged, I think, to a British guy. Her life was all ahead of her. And then, bang, it's all taken away. And she dies at the age of 30. What was that moment like for you and your family?
Well, I think it was just, it kind of was like a shattering experience, partially because she was doing well, she was very happy, she was over there, and I remember my mom calling me. My wife and I were on our way back from church. It was like a Sunday morning, and she said that, Christina's in the hospital. She had a blood clot. And so I'm thinking, like, is she okay? And she seemed to be stable. So she was in the hospital for a couple days and then had the embolism and died in the hospital. And so I just didn't think that that was something that was even possible at that point, because I thought that she was stable. And so you just feel like, you have your sibling, their future was robbed. And, it's just something I wish I could get back.
Heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Really heartbreaking.
Because I think she would, she probably would have moved back to Florida. She was in Charlotte at the time working for a bank, but she always wanted to get back here. And so, she would be here, probably being involved in a lot of stuff that we were doing. And so.
What did she make of you and what was happening with you?
I was the big brother, so we were 85. I was 7 years apart. So we weren't necessarily ever in like the same school together or any of that. So I was kind of like a little bit rarefied air in some respects. She always looked up to me. And I think some of it was because I was doing things, she tried to measure up to me. And I told her, I was like, don't worry about that. I was like, you just be you and do what you can do. And, she was very successful. Once she got out of school, she got her master's and everything. So, but, it's a tough thing.
You're clearly feeling quite emotional thinking about it.
Yeah.
It's hard to think of a worse thing, actually, for a family, I think, than losing a sibling.
I just think, people have their whole lives ahead of them. And when you're talking about that age, it's a big tragedy.
You're a Catholic. I'm a Catholic. How important was faith at a moment like that for you?
It's important because I think you start to question, things that are unjust, like why did this have to happen? And you just have to have faith that there's a plan in place. Trust in God. There's no guarantee that you're going to have a life without challenges and without heartbreak, and that's just a function of being human. And so it was important for me.
You pray?
I do.
Every day?
I try to.
Do you?
Yep.
You take time every day to?
I try to. I do.
What do you pray for?
I usually just praying for family. I'm praying for the health of the state. Praying for wisdom when I need to kind of tap into that.
Do you think you've got wisdom?
I try to. I think that that's something that's accumulated with experience, and I think I've gained a lot since I've been governor. But I wouldn't say that I'm tapped out yet. I got more to do.
Let's get to the question you're not going to answer. Want to guess?
Can't imagine what this is.
Let me ask it anyway, and you can bat it away, because I'm not expecting you to announce now. But everybody's assuming you're going to announce reasonably soon you're going to run for President of the United States. Are you?
So I haven't made a final decision on it. I've told people I've got a lot that I've got to do over the next few months in Florida. We're going to put a lot of points on the board, and then we'll see how the dust settles after that. But I can tell you, we just have a lot of people that realize the country's not going in the right direction and believe that what we've been able to do in Florida, if we could apply that nationally, would kind of get America back on track and back on our foundations. And so I take that very seriously. It's humbling that people have come to me and asked me to do it or urged me to do it. So stay tuned.
That sounds like almost a yes.
It's a stay tuned.
Why wouldn't you?
Well, because look, I've got a young family. I've got different obligations, and it's not the easiest thing in the world to go through. And I also want to make sure that I have a very clear rationale for doing what I'm doing. All I'm interested in doing is getting things done and accomplishing things. I don't need a title. I don't need fanfare. I just want to know that if I put my mind to this, if we ever did that and we're successful, what could I do to make a difference? And that's what I have to have.
Do you think you have what it takes to be President of the United States?
Look, I think what it takes is to have a vision for the country, have the ability to exercise leadership, and being willing to stand in that fire when it gets really, really hot and not back down under pressure. And I think I have all those things.
You got a great endorsement from someone. Ron DeSantis is a brilliant young leader, Yale and then Harvard Law, who would make a great governor of Florida, which turned out to be true. He loves our country. He's a true fighter. I mean, there's a ringing endorsement from President Trump.
Times change a little bit, I guess. It is what it is. So.
Yeah, I mean, he was a big fan.
No, I mean, I think, and I think, we had a good relationship as a congressman. And I think one of the reasons he got to know me is because I saw this Russia collusion thing as a farce from the beginning.
Right.
Very few people said that. We had a handful of us in Congress that were fighting back against that. And so I would go out on TV and I would defend him when it wasn't popular and when it was kind of politically risky. But I just thought it was the right thing to do. And I thought that he had good ideas for the country. So I wanted to do it. And then when I became governor, his last 2 years as president, I was governor my first 2 years, and we worked very well together. I mean, he had a place in Florida. He wasn't a resident yet, but he understood Florida and really worked well with us to serve our state.
You made a fatal error in your relationship with
What's that?
Donald Trump. You got too popular.
Well, I would say if you look at some of the change from that and all the way up, what's been the major thing that happened that's changed his tune was my re-election victory. Right. I mean, that's kind of the mark.
Well, because many of his picks in the midterms did badly, and you, who had been, he was a mentor in many ways, I guess, early on, had this thumping victory. And I guess if you're him and you're desperate to get back to the White House, this was a bit of a nightmare that you were getting such validation in Florida.
My view, though, is look, we should want the country to do well. I want other Republicans to do well. I want them to eclipse me. We're setting a great standard in Florida. Have everyone up their game. I want other governors to do a great job.
Which is your favorite nickname that Trump's given you so far? Is it Ron DeSanctimonious or Meatball Ron?
Well, I can't.
I think even he went off Meatball Ron.
I can't. I don't know how to spell DeSanctimonious. I don't really know what it means, but I kind of like it's long. It's got a lot of vowels. I mean, so we go with that. That's fine. You can call me whatever you want. I mean, just as long as you also call me a winner, because that's what we've been able to do in Florida is put a lot of points on the board and really take the state to the next level.
At some stage, I mean, have you read Mary Shelley's book Frankenstein?
I have not.
Okay, it's a great book, and obviously it's spawned several movies. But there are prophetic words of warning from Dr. Waldman to Dr. Frankenstein. You have created a monster, and it will destroy you.
And you're alluding to what? I have seen the movie, though. It is a good movie.
Well, you know what I'm talking about, Governor. It's like where Dr. Frankenstein creates a monster, then loses control of the monster, and in the book, obviously, the monster ends up killing him.
Well, look, at the end of
the parallel I'm making.
At the end of the day, what's best for the country, and let's put the country first rather than worry about any personalities or any type of individual ambition.
But
at the end of the day, I'm a vessel for the aspirations of the people I represent. It's really not about me. It's about whether I can be someone. And yes, you have attributes, leadership, some of the things you mentioned, thick skin, I think is important. But ultimately, it's about them. It's not about me. And I think if every elected official thought that way, we'd probably be better. Ronald Reagan said, there's no limit to what you can accomplish if you don't care who gets the credit.
That's true, but you're up against somebody who definitely cares who gets the credit, who's desperate to want to win back the White House and prove that his theory that he had it wrong.
Well, I'm not up against anybody, quite yet. We're up
against.
Well,
the polls basically have you two up here and everybody else down here. So if you did
run, the way I view it, though, if I were to run, I'm running against Biden. We're competing for the Republican potentially. I get that. But ultimately, the guy I'm going to focus on is Biden because I think he's failed the country. I think the country wants a change. I think they want a fresh start in a new direction. And so we'll be very vocal about that. I spent a lot of time in Florida fighting back against...
You think you could beat Biden?
I think so.
So you're running then?
No, I didn't say that. I just said I think I could. I mean, I think that's... I mean, if you look at Florida...
Who would be harder to beat, Biden or Donald Trump?
I don't know. Those are two different
electorates. I mean, if you do decide to run, I mean, we can pretend around the horses here, but if you do decide to run in the next few months, obviously it will then be you v. Donald Trump for the Republican nomination. People have been quite kind of scathing. They've said you're house-trained Donald, you're Diet Coke to his full Coke, right? You've heard all this stuff. What are the differences between you? Well, I know I know him very well. Having now spent time with you, I could immediately identify a few differences. But what do you think are the differences?
Well, I mean, I think there's a few things. I mean, obviously, the approach to COVID was different. I mean, I would have fired somebody like Fauci. I think that he got way too big for his britches, and I think he did a lot of damage. I also think, just in terms of my approach to leadership, I get personnel in the government who have the agenda of the people and share our agenda. If you bring your own agenda in, you're gone. We're just not going to have that. So the way we run the government, I think, is no daily drama, focus on the big picture, and put points on the board, and I think that that's something that's very important.
You've not been sucked into responding to any of the taunts. Is that a deliberate strategy?
I'm just not following it. I mean, I get taunted and I get attacked every day. I mean, you see some of that. To me, it's just kind of background noise. It's not important for me to be fighting with people on social media. It's not accomplishing anything for the people I represent. So we really just focus on knocking out victories day after day. And if I got involved in all the undertow, I would not be able to be an effective governor. So I don't think it's something that makes sense for me.
As all this heat around maybe a presidential run gets hotter, a lot more focus now on you and policies and so on. One of the things that people criticize you about, they say you try to straddle various positions here, which are unsustainable going forward. One is to win the Republican nomination and to appeal to the Trump MAGA base, and the other would be to win a national election against Joe Biden. You know this. And some of your critics say that you're trying to pander too much to the right. Examples being this bill going through to try and reduce the abortion time limit to 6 weeks in Florida, which would make it one of the toughest places in America to have an abortion. The bill also potentially going through about the ability to carry a gun in a concealed way without a permit, when you need a permit, for example, to drive a car. People are saying that you're pushing this really quite. I don't want to get into the semantics of those debates, right? I've learned that it's an American issue, and that debate should be had by Americans, and I respect that. But in terms of where you position yourself, are you worried that if you take such hardline positions, hard conservative positions on things like abortion, guns, and so on, that it makes it more difficult for you to win a national election should you choose to run?
Well, I don't really think that they're necessarily hardline positions. I mean, for example, the concealed carry, that's 25 states have that in the United States. And I think we could say my first 4 years as governor, a lot of people said the same criticism, that somehow I was only doing stuff for right. In reality, I mean, we were doing things like raise teacher salaries, we were doing conservation, we were doing things across the board, and I ended up winning a record victory. I won independence by 18 percentage points. And so that'll be the same formula that we would take. And honestly, forget about me. I think anybody should take a formula like that nationally. You can't win with just Republicans. You got to win with independents, and you need to convince some of these Democrats, which I was able to do in Florida, because there are people that are Democrats because that's what their family were. They're not woke. They don't like some of the nonsense going on. They want their streets safe, and they want quality education. So I think you could appeal to people across the gambit.
I just wanted to check your fingers for a moment, because I've noticed a very slimmed down Ron DeSantis. You've lost a lot of weight recently.
Well, we're at the end of the day, it's like New Year's resolution. Just get back in the swing of things.
I had the same thing.
I'm a athlete and a military veteran, and so as governor, you can get caught up in a lot of other stuff.
How much have you lost?
I don't know. I mean, I don't weigh or anything like that.
I mean, quite a lot.
I'm on a good regimen, and we'll keep it going. And
apparently, no carbs and no dessert.
So I think the sugar is the biggest issue, because basically if you do sugar, your body burns sugar. If you don't, it burns fat. And so if you're working out and just eating halfway decent.
I'm doing exactly the same thing, by the way, since Christmas. Okay. So we're on this together.
There you go.
You're probably doing a bit better than me. But I was asking about your fingers because of this, scandal, which broke last week, that you apparently were eating chocolate pudding with 3 fingers.
Now, was that anonymous sources or something?
It was a very serious allegation. In fact, I congratulated the journalist who broke it on the new Watergate. But I have to put it to you, Governor, have you ever eaten a chocolate pudding with 3 fingers?
I don't remember ever doing that. I'm telling you, maybe when I was a kid, but it's interesting. There's a lot of people when they go at you, sometimes they have really good ammunition, like you're a crook, you did this, you did that. For me, they're talking about pudding. Is that really the best you got? Okay, bring it on.
But now you're not having puddings.
No pudding.
They're done.
No way. It's sugar, man. You can't
And
be doing the
these
puddings
two
with
things are
sugar.
not linked in
I don't
any
know.
way.
Maybe there's sugar-free pudding. I got to look into that and try to figure out how we go from there.
Governor, it's been great to meet you.
Yeah.
And to get under the skin a bit of Governor Ron DeSantis. Who knows? Next few months, maybe we'll come and interview again when you're running for president.
Well, I'm glad you came to Tallahassee. I know it's your first time, and we welcome you to Florida's historic capital.
Next time you're in St Andrews in Scotland,
We got to do that.
Let's have a little.
If I can get out there, we got to do that.
Little battle on the old course.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
England v America. May the best man win.
You've got local knowledge,
It'll
though.
be
I've only played it once.
Pay back for George III.
There you go.
Good to meet you.
Hey, thank you. Appreciate you.
Appreciate your time.